Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the League Racing TV YouTube channel for round 7 of the first season of League 1 of the Esports Masters League Teams Championship. My name is Aidan Carter, otherwise known as Carmentis. I'll be taking you through proceedings on a Wednesday evening, as per usual, and joining me in the commentary box for the second time this season is Luke Etheridge. Luke, how are you doing this evening?
I'm very well, thanks. Good evening, Aidan. Good evening to everyone that is watching. Great to be back here at EML for another historic track in Formula 1. Last time around, we had Silverstone. This time it is Spa for the Belgian Grand Prix, and we could well see variable weather once again. We're probably almost certainly going to see fantastic racing once again.
Yeah, it's really a historical circuit. Like I say, so many iconic corners to this track. Obviously, Eau Rouge, so iconic in modern Formula 1 cars. Pouin, the Les Combes chicane, the bus stop, Blanchimont. So many names stick out with this circuit as being iconic corners. It is the longest track on the calendar as well, so it provides that little bit of a challenge. And like you say, the alternate weather conditions that we can find here at Spa, much like we found at Silverstone last time, can play a part. And Silverstone, last time out, if you guys didn't tune into that race, it was M Short who took home, I believe, his third race victory of the season for XL. So great performance last time out from M Short. Neo had a great result as well in third place in the second XL car, which means XL have now slashed the gap between themselves and QVR in the standings. It was 36 points before Silverstone. Coming out of Silverstone, it is now 18, so it's literally been cut in half after the last round, so it's all to play for heading into the 7th round of the season. Just looking at the rest of the championship standings below the top two, we've got Team TTG who run in third, just a further 13 points back. They had a solid run last time out as well. They closed in on QVR, so it's becoming a bit of a three-way fight now for the top of the championship. Below them, the battle for fourth continues to rage on. The QVR Academy team currently hold fourth by only 12 points over Leonis, 13 points over International Racing Team, who are continuing to march their way up the standings. Virtual Esports Racing are currently in 7th on 104 points ahead of TTG Academy, who are on 69 points. They are 9 points ahead of Vapor, and they are 3 points ahead of OWR, who round off the top 10 in the standings. So, looking at the championship standings so far, Silverstone, a real boost now for XL, who are right in the thick of that championship battle now.
Yeah, most certainly. QVR had a bit of a difficult time of it last time around, maybe just because of the varying weather conditions. We saw some other teams who we thought would do a bit better. Leonis seemed to have a bit of a struggle. VER looked really good in the qualifying session. It just fell apart from them in the race, but definitely XL looking really good at the moment. M Short getting those 3 victories for them. He's shown fantastic form on Wednesday nights. He's also leading the EML Formula 1 Championship, which we usually have on a Wednesday on the weeks when the team championship is up running. He's not racing for them though tonight, so it'll be interesting to see how the 2 drivers that they've got tonight do. Noon and Gary and J. Cole, I should say. Gary replacing Noon as a reserve driver. It'll be interesting to see how they do around here. QVR, they'll be hoping for some good recovery. Verstappen here once again, things didn't go well for him early on, so he'll be hoping for good performances this time. And there's a lot of drivers who I think will be hoping to do better. Zario, one of those who did well in qualifying, and things unfortunately fell apart in the race, bit like it did for Daniel as well, who's driving for Leonis. A lot of drivers with a lot to prove tonight.
Yeah, really are a lot of drivers, like you say, and we have got a few new additions to the championship tonight as well, so we're just going to run you through the full grid of drivers before we get ready for qualifying. So, the Clean Vigor Racing team, like you say, is Verstappen, who once again drives. He's alongside Campbell for today's race. The International Racing team are running URL Matthias, who scored a 4th place finish last time out for them at Silverstone, so he's on a good run of points. Scuderia Seb is racing alongside him. Virtual Esports Racing are running VER Rage and VR Zario. OWR are running Shumi and XC. The QVR Academy team are running QVR Sneaky and QVR Maledictus. The XL Racing team are running XL Jaco and XL Gary. Leonis Racing are running Daniel and Patrick. The Vapor Esports team are running Morgan and Kazuks. The Team TCG main team are running Bianchi and Slash. And the Academy team are running Noisy and Jorg as their 2 drivers. So look out for those. A few new drivers here tonight, but a lot of drivers we have seen here before. Looking into Spa, based on what we've seen maybe so far from this season, who stands out to you maybe as a possible favourite here today?
Well, just from commentating on TTML, Matthias seems to enjoy the higher speed circuits, ones that have quite a few like long straights and high speed natures. He did well in Bahrain in TTML. He didn't do too badly yesterday at Silverstone, so maybe this could be a good circuit for him. I think Verstappen expect some pretty decent performances from him. Daniel, I think, will be having a point to prove that he can do things in the race, and maybe Xavier as well, as I mentioned in my previous talking. They did okay in qualifying, it just seemed to fall apart for them in the race, unfortunately. I think we can guarantee it's going to be pretty close. Spa's the longest track on the calendar, so qualifying probably won't be as close as we see at some other circuits, but there's plenty of overtaking opportunities in the race. That tremendous flat-out run from the bottom of the hill at La Source all the way through Eau Rouge Radion along the Kemmel Straight into Lacombe. He's going to see a lot of slipstreaming, especially on lap 1. You don't normally get passed into turn 1 on lap 1 if you start on pole position, but you might just give the driver behind you a lovely slipstream for a good 20 seconds, then you might find it a bit difficult to defend even without DRS on the first 2 laps.
Yeah, we see that a lot in real-life Formula 1 as well. Obviously, a big note of that is the 2018 start of that race when Vettel took the lead up towards the Les Commes chicane. It is very easy to do. It's easy to get fooled into using ERS into turn 1 and then forgetting you need to use it on that flat-out run, like you say, that's 20 to 25 seconds of just flat-out driving up the hill. So really, really crucial for these drivers that they don't overuse their ERS in towards turn 1 on the first lap. For a lap around Spa, though, it looks like Daniel's the first one out on the track for the Leonis Racing Team. Leonis had a great start to the championship. They're running inside the top 3 quite early on with a few good performances. I believe Lyronix was one of the early performers for Leonis, but since really the mid part of the season, Leonis have kind of faded a little bit. They've not really had the consistency since the start of the season. It's been a shame for them to see them drop a little bit down the field. Do you think this is a good opportunity for them to maybe bounce back tonight?
Yeah, definitely is. Maybe take an inspiration from their Premier drivers at the moment. They're currently winning the Premier Division, and you'll be able to see that with James Head and Dan Hoggard taking through the action there on League Racing TV at 8:30. They'll be hoping to do really well. Daniel, I've said before, he's a very quick driver, as is Zach. There's nothing wrong with the pace, it's just getting the decisions right when it comes to the strategy, especially at races where there's going to be some wet weather, and we are hearing that it could well be wet at the start of this race, so that's going to be something really interesting to think about with the strategy. What it does mean, almost certainly everyone's going to try and qualify on the soft tyres, but it depends how long the rain lasts. Is it going to be quite a short rain shower, so you might have to even make a second pit stop in the race, or can you stretch the intermediate or full wet tyres? We don't know how heavy it's going to rain. Can you stretch those long enough so you only really have to make one change of tyres? And that could be the key round here. It's not really the longest pit lane, so don't be surprised if we do see it start off on the intermediate tyres. Drivers might go medium soft or soft medium, or maybe even soft soft if they really want an aggressive strategy.
Yeah, we might see that from a few drivers, and Daniel was one of those that was caught out in Silverstone last time out for pitting too early for another set of dry compound, or another set of intermediates before it dried out. So hopefully for his sake he might not repeat that same mistake, or maybe that strategy might work for him this time, who knows. But he's on a lap at the moment. He's the first person who's going to be able to complete a lap for us, heading up to the end of the first set. To then he's already gone through Eau Rouge, he's down the Kemmel Straight, coming up towards the lake. 9.7 for the first sector, purple so far, as he is the first one through that sector point. Now through Malmedy down the hill, a little bit reprofiled on this game, so you can use a lot more of the exit curve there as he heads now down towards Bruxelles, the really long right-handed hairpin, and then into the corner with no name. Down the hill, it's a 90-degree corner, not really too difficult as he head down towards probably the most famous corner on this track after Eau Rouge has become somewhat of an easy flat corner now, through down the second part, to the left hand side of the track, and then gets in towards the Lafania chicane. Then 2X slows down in the second part. Don't take too much entry curb on the inside of the second part, it can cause you to lose the rear of the car. Now in Stavalo, the flat out curve pull throw in the wet conditions, this corner is a nightmare to manage. That barrier sticks up right on the exit of the corner, and now to this isn't straight, down towards the Blanchimont corner. Easy flat once again in modern Formula 1 cars, not the challenge it was in previous years. And then down towards the reprofiled bus stop, obviously reprofiled for the 2007 Grand Prix, heads in towards the chicane, hops over the curb on the inside, doesn't take much of the curb on the left hand side. It's a nice neat lap so far from Daniels, not been pushing the boundaries, but it's a good banker, and it's a 41.1 to go onto provisional pole position. Wait to see who's going to be next to cross the line behind him. George is on a lap at the moment as Verstappen's actually crossed the line for QVR and has gone a 10th. So he goes onto provisional pole position, and his QVR teammate goes directly behind him by just under 200ths of a second. So QVR off to a good start in qualifying. We've got one of the TTG cars coming in through the bus chicane. Gary only P4 and a 41.5, so he's a little bit off the pace. now coming up towards the line. He crosses the line, only P5 on a 41.5 as well, the same as Gary. Kazakh now goes in front of the pair of them as well. He goes into P4, J. Cole goes into P6, just alongside his XL teammate. So, early blood it seems so far to the QVR drivers.
Yeah, QVR doing very well indeed. I was on board with Gary towards the end of his lap, and it did look as though Noisy was very close to him as they were heading across the line. I think Noisy was just trying to get that optimal wide line you see everyone take out of the bus stop chicane to obviously straighten up as early as possible on the run down towards La Source and just try and gain that extra half a tenth to a tenth of a second. Whether that just distracted Gary, I'm not so sure. Low 141s though, very respectable times, especially this early on in a session. Zario's come across the line now to do a 141.003. I thought that was going to be the first driver to hop into the 1 minute 40s. You've got to be slightly careful around this track because it is the longest track. You really get the least amount of runs in qualifying. Even getting 3 runs in can be a bit of a struggle at times if you get held up in the pits or you have a particularly slow outlap or inlap. So getting a good banker in early on is crucial, and Maledictus and Scuderia Seb, they appear to have invalidated their laps. It's fairly easy to do that around here on certain corners. Just coming out of Malmedy, it is possible, and also Puhon, very possible to run wide there, though it's probably preferable to run wide than it is to hit that inside curve. It is one of the curves on this game that does tend to spin you around instantly if you make contact.
Yeah, you really want to stay away as far away from it as you can, as Matthias now crosses the line on a 41 flat, goes into P5 just behind Morgan and just ahead of Daniel behind him on the road. Didn't quite see who that was crossed the line. I think that was Noisy that just crossed the line and went into P8 for the TTG Academy team. Got more people coming up towards the line. VER Rage was another person who invalidated their time. Shumi's invalidated his time as well. Scuderia Sab has invalidated another lap in this session, so he won't be improving on that 18th place on the grid as it stands. The top 5 though, all in the 41 flats. It's incredibly close. You said at the start of qualifying it might not be that close in qualifying because this track is the longest track on the calendar. I think these guys have proved you wrong. It's just over a tenth covering the top 6 on the grid, which is incredibly close. But once again, it's QVR at the front of the field, the team that have the most impact, it seems, at the front of the field. But once again, Zario very strong in qualifying at the front of the field, maybe looking to try and bounce back from what was a really disappointing Silverstone race, much similar to how this qualifying went. He was at the front for a lot of the qualifying session and it fell apart for him in the wet conditions. So to see if we do have a wet start to this race, whether that he can really bounce back from that and make amends for what happened last time out. We're now in that gap really between the first and the second runs. You do often get gaps in the sessions around this circuit because of how long the circuit is. So Luke, just coming to you a little bit further down the field, is there anyone you think that's maybe a little bit out of position after the first runs?
I wouldn't surprise me if we see J. Cole maybe move up slightly up the order. I think I'm interested to see what Bianchi can do as well for TTG. He's only on an outlap at the moment, maybe just feeling like he wants to get less laps in just to maybe give himself that bit of free air. Slipstreaming is something that we haven't talked about. I wonder whether any teams will try and use the slipstreaming, because we already mentioned it is such a long, flat-out run. You don't really want to be right behind your teammate going into Eau Rouge and Radion, as you'll just get caught in the dirty air and you might have to lift off the throttle and ruin your run. But if you catch him just as you're coming towards the top of the hill and get a nice slipstream all the way down the Kemmel Straight, it could gain you a lot of time. So with how close it is at the moment, especially if I was some of the teams that are maybe a bit further down, so like XL in 9th or 11th at the moment, it's definitely something I'd think about on my second run.
Yeah, definitely worth trying it, especially, like you say, for the drivers a little bit further down the field at the moment. There's no harm in at least maybe on one of your 3 runs in qualifying, just trying that out just to see if it gives you anything. And like you say, that run up towards Les Combes, probably really the only place you can pull it off. The run down towards Blanchimont isn't straight enough for a slipstream to really work unless you are tucked right underneath your teammate. But Bianchi then coming up towards, going to be setting up now then, so we'll see what he can do for TTG. Up in 3rd place in the just a little bit behind XL, but they are not far off the championship lead themselves. They are still right in this battle for the championship. Belgium has already picked up a win for them so far this season. Can they try and repeat that? Can they get back to the front of the field as he heads through the La Source hairpin and then down towards Eau Rouge on this second run qualifying? Then a little bit of understeer through La Source. It was a little bit wide on the exit, but not too bad as he heads up through Eau Rouge, easy flat. Barely a corner in modern Formula 1 cars as he heads now down towards the Les Combes chicane, tucks to the right-hand side of the track for the shortest run that he can possibly get up towards the end of the first sector. We saw a 0.7 from Daniel. It's a 0.7 from Bianchi as well, so it's right up there with the fastest we've seen so far in this qualifying session. As you head through Les Combes, down through Malmedy, doesn't take quite as wide a line through Malmedy, maybe compromises a little bit on his entry speed through that corner. Down through this hairpin, no lockup it seems for Bianchi, so it's nice and neat through there. down into the corner with no name. Again, very, very neat. Not using a lot of the track. We've seen a lot of the drivers not really pushing the extremities of the track so far. Stay well away from that curb or the inside of Puon. So easy to spin the car out, but it's been nice and neat so far from Bianchi as he heads into the Lafania chicane. Again, staying away from the curves, keeping it nice and neat, not pushing the boundaries as he heads now down towards Stavolo in the end of the second sector. Middle sector looking like for Bianchi is a 12.9. Another strong middle sector then for the CTG drivers. He heads into the final sector. He's got in front of him, so this looks like it could be an easy valid lap time for Bianchi. Could it put him right in the thick of the battle at the front of the field? Both QVR drivers have just started their second runs in qualifying, so we'll see what they can do. Can they knock Zario off the top spot? Bianchi though into the bus stop chicane. Can he try and take the top spot in qualifying? Nice and neat, a little bit wide through the exit of the corner up to 40 towards the line, and it's a great lap time for Bianchi, and it's a 40.8, the first person into the 1 minute 40s. Brilliant lap time from Bianchi, and you've got to say, from looking on board that lap, there's probably maybe a little bit more time on the table.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you consider as well, though, also there's track evolution, Xavier, Verstappen and Campbell won't be too worried about that. They could easily find another couple of attempts on this lap. In fact, Campbell's heading towards the finish line now, so we'll see what he can do for QVR. There we go. He does actually find a tenth of a second, a 140.922 for him. Puts in second place for now. Verstappen's invalidated his lap, and Xavier was about 4 tenths down, so not ideal runs for those guys. Daniel's coming through the final sector now. He's just headed up towards Blanchimont. He's about a tenth up on his time. It might not seem a lot, but only has to find possibly just over another tenth of a second. Could find himself on the front row of the grid.
Yeah, anything can really happen as Maledictus has now crossed the line, gone P9 for the QVR Academy team. Rage is now in 8th for VER. He's just been replaced actually by Kazakhs, who's now into the 141.5s. Daniel then to the line, crosses the line, goes P3 on a 40.9, just behind Campbell once again, but right at the front of the field. See what else people are doing. Zary's found a lot of time in the middle sector, but it's still not enough to try and put him maybe back onto a provisional pole. But it was nearly 2.5 tenths up on his personal best in the middle part of the lap, so there is a lot of pace left in Zario for the rest of this session. Scuderia Seb has just gone P7, just ahead of his teammate then. So both of the international racing cars, 7th and 8th on the grid, they split these two Vapor cars coming through then, as Morgan's actually on a lap at the moment. He's a little bit down in the first sector. We'll see what his middle sector is like as well. Got a little bit of traffic in front, but they move out the way nicely. Morgan then through that corner next into the one. It's a 12.9 in the middle part of the lap. A brilliant middle sector from Morgan. Has found 2 tenths of a second, so he could put himself right at the front of the field as well. Through this final sector, which is pretty much all about straight line speed and the braking in towards the bus stop. We've got more people coming to the line. That's Matthias, who's gone P3. Great lap time from him as well. We've got another car up towards the line. Didn't quite see who that was that's just crossed the lines, but here comes Morgan out through the bus stop chicane up towards the line. Is it enough to put him on provisional pole? Not quite. He's just off the top spot, 12 thousandths of a second. Morgan goes into P2, and after the second runs in qualifying, there's still barely anything to split the top 5.
No, there isn't indeed. Bianchi, he might not be out too long trying to get another one in on this qualifying session with 5 minutes to go. Morgan looking very good as well. Xavier and Verstappen probably slightly disappointed that they've not been able to improve on their times, and you can see the difference that has made. They were 1-2, they're now 6-7, and not too far outside of being knocked out of the top 10. And if it is going to be a wet start for the race, you haven't got that advantage, of course, if you start outside the top 10, of being on fresh tyres, because everyone will be able to choose fresh tyres as it is going to be a wet start. So they'll hope they don't fall any further down the order. Only driver yet to set a time is OWR Schumi. He is down in last place. Unfortunately for him, his qualifying is going a bit like Schumi's did in his comeback to Formula 1. I seem to remember Michael having quite a few problems around this track in qualifying at Mercedes. Didn't do too badly in the races though, from what I remember, so maybe there's hope for him yet.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of hope, and I think for the OWO team in general as well, I think they're hoping for a little bit more from these last few rounds of the season. Have been since the start of the championship. They're not far off the team in front of them. They're only 3 points behind actually, so there is room for them to move up the field. Silverstone was, I think, their best result to date, so looking to maybe build on that momentum a little bit. Felgen currently 19th on a 42.1. He's just behind Zach currently for Leonis Racing, who's not had a great session so far, currently 18th on the grid on a 42 flat. Not where he would be, especially want to be, considering that his teammate's currently 5th. And the same for Slash as well. Slash driving for the TTG team, currently 17th, while his teammate is on pole position. So whilst it's all well and good maybe having a driver at the front of the field for your team, if you want to win this championship, you've got to have both of your drivers right up there, haven't you?
Yeah, Formula One is always a team sport, and that is no more the case than in this, where there is no individual drivers' championship. It is all about scoring points for your team. So there's no point having one driver that is incredibly quick and one that's a bit further off the order, because you are just going to lose out. I know you said OWR wanted to move up the order, but only 3 points ahead of them at the moment are Vapor Esports, and they've got both of their drivers in the top 10, so this could be a very good day for Vapor indeed. Could well find themselves moving up ahead of the TTG Academy team. Quick reminder of the point system that is used here. It is 25 points that you manage to get yourselves for a victory, 22 for second place, 20 for third, 18 for fourth, and then 16 down to 1 for the final place. So as long as you finish the race, you are guaranteed to get yourself some points. So it's always worth carrying on in this race. Wouldn't surprise me if we do see a few retirements though. If it's only meant to be dry, if it's only meant to be wet at the start of the race, you're not going to go for a full wet setup. Eau Rouge and Radion, heavy cars, lower downforce than you could ideally want for the conditions. It's going to be very tricky indeed.
It is really going to be tricky, and that Eau Rouge on the first lap, even in dry conditions, can be tricky. Cars bottoming out through that corner. Very, very easy to lose the rear of the car up the hill, so look out for that in the opening laps of the race. Sneaky was just on a run for the Academy team, but he's invalidated on the inside of No Name, so that is not going to be an improvement for him. He was a 10th up in the first sector, so he could have found quite a few places on the grid, but currently lagging down in 15th place. Still, the XL drivers haven't really improved, and the XL drivers are doing that toe tactic that we mentioned earlier on. J. Cole tucked right up behind his teammate Gary, down towards the Les Combes chicane, gets a nice toe and sets a brilliant first sector because of it. He's 2/10 up on his personal best. Now J. Cole needs to manage this through the rest of the lap, but he's got heaps of traffic in front of him on the road. Matthias is the first, and Matthias I don't think has recognised that J. Cole is on a lap here. Matthias does move out the way at the last moment, but that is definitely going to have affected J. Cole. This is now going to be behind the second of the international cars. Moves out the way nicely to Scuderi said, but J. Cole, even if he isn't affected by the dirty air, might get a little bit flustered by the amount of traffic around him, and that is the problem with tracks like this. If you go out too early, you really run the risk of being caught up in the traffic around you.
Yeah, it's amazing. 7 kilometres of tarmac, and we seem to have 4 cars wanting the same 100 metres there. And there we go, J. Cole's invalidated and ran wide. It's not going well for XL at the moment. We've got 2 different drivers to what they had last time, but Gary has had a podium so far this season in EML, so you would expect him to maybe be a bit higher up than 12th at the moment. He's less than half a second off on the longest circuit on the game, so it's not like he's doing terribly, but would want to be higher up the order. Maybe though this is a setup choice, maybe they have gone for more of a bit of a wet setup just to feel more comfortable in the race. At the end of the day, there's no points for qualifying.
Exactly, yeah, so they may go for something a little bit different, and we saw teams like QVR do that at Silverstone, and while they had a poor qualifying, they somewhat recovered in the race conditions, so it's all about finding that balance really, especially with the mixed conditions we've got. Zario is now on a lap, currently heading towards the end of the second sector. Didn't find any time in the first part of the lap, but what is the middle sector for Zario? It's 2.5 tenths up. Middle sector from Zario as he heads now through the final sector. Has got no cars in front of him on the road. Can he put himself back on provisional pole that Bianchi has held for more than half the session now as he heads through Blanchimont, easy flat, and now up towards the bus stop chicane? How late does he dare be on the brakes? It's as late as he possibly can. Locks up a little bit, runs a little bit deep, but he'll get away with it. Runs a little bit deep at the apex again in the second part, but up towards the line. Zario, can he go back onto provisional pole? He can. He's still found time in the final sector, and it's a 40.6. He didn't quite get the second run in, but the third run was stunning from Zario. Back onto provisional pole. Slash crosses the line. Only 11th on the grid for the TTG team. I think Daniel is coming up to the line shortly. Zach is coming up to the line. Only improves to 17th. We've got Daniel coming up towards the line now as well. What can he do? Currently 6th on the grid. Crosses the line. Goes P2. The great final run. So drivers still improving on their final runs in this qualifying session. Bianchi, though, has invalidated his final run as Campbell has now taken provisional pole ahead of Zario, and Verstappen's gone up into P3, so QVR right back at the front of the field at the end of qualifying. It's Rage that crosses the line next to VR, goes P7. Good qualifying from him as well. Looking for more people a bit further down. Morgan's coming up towards the final sector. He's not found any time so far on this lap, so he's not going to be improving unless he can find something in this final sector. Matthias is on a lap as well. What can he do? What can Gary do? Currently down in 14th place. Scooty Rear Seb crosses the line, goes P8. Gary will be next to cross the line for XL. Where does he go? Goes P11 only. So the drivers that dominated last time out for XL are nowhere near the front this time around. Matthias goes into P2 ahead of Zario by 18 thousandths of a second. Morgan crosses the line, doesn't improve. So there's only Bianchi left who hasn't set a time, and his time is invalidated. So qualifying is over, And the order completely changed again for the third time in this session, and it's Campbell who gets pole position.
Yeah, fantastic qualifying from the QVR team. The main team doing a brilliant job there. Campbell fastest, Verstappen in fourth position, and with both XL drivers outside the top 10, this is a wonderful chance for them to extend their lead in the championship. Team TTG, they're third in the championship. I think they might have maybe just expected a bit more / outside the top 10, and Bianchi only really getting one run, but it was good enough to put him in sixth place, so maybe we'll see a bit more consistency from him in the race. But if it's going to be a wet start, just keeping it clean on lap one is going to be the achievement here. Be nice and careful, everyone, and then get used to the weather conditions as they go along. But Spa is one of the tracks where you probably practice more in the wet than you do some of the other circuits because of how infamous it is for having changeable weather.
Yeah, it really is. You do a lot of practice around this circuit. Just going to run you through the grid quickly. We've got 6 teams inside the top 7. So it's Campbell, Matthias, Zario, Verstappen, Daniel, Bianchi, Morgan, Rage, Scuderia, Seb, and TTGA Jorg inside the top 10. Gary ahead of Kazix, Maledictus, and Noisy the top 14. Didn't quite get to see the rest of the grid, but a lot of teams inside the top 7. Like I said, 6 teams inside the top 7, but both QVR drivers crucially inside that top 4. We mentioned at the start of qualifying that this might be the most spread out field because of the circuit, but it ended up actually being the closest qualifying of the season, with the top 4 separated by less than half a tenth of a second. That is an incredibly close amount for the longest track on the calendar. And when we thought there might be a bit of rain at the start, it actually looks like it's heavy rain here. This looks like a lot of rain that these drivers are going to have to deal with. So if it is going to dry out in this race, possibly, doesn't look like it's going to be for a while yet.
Yeah, this is the sort of rain that gives David Coulthard nightmares and cold sweats back to 1998, where he was the one who instigated that now famous 14-car incident and had the crash with Michael Schumacher later in the race. It is absolutely pouring it down. Anything other than full wets would surprise me. But we've seen it before on this game, where in really heavy rain, the intermediates can do quite well, as long as there is a bit of a drier line out on circuit. So maybe, just maybe, it won't be too long before we do see drivers changing onto the intermediate tyres. Whether we'll get to the full dry conditions, we'll have to wait and see. Going back to why qualifying can be so close, I know I said earlier on it's for long circuits, so you might see bigger gaps. It's actually quite a straightforward circuit, this one. It's not the hardest to master, despite being such a high-speed circuit. We've mentioned Eau Rouge, Pouhon, Blanchimont, corners that used to be absolutely fearsome in the older days. No problem whatsoever now for modern Formula 1 cars, so it's the braking zones where you really gain a lot of time into the bus stop chicane, into La Combe and into La Source being the 3 main places where you'll probably see any attempts at overtaking, and 2 of them are DRS zones, of course, when it's dry.
Yeah, when it is dry, exactly. And one of the other things maybe that differentiates these drivers as well is the fact that the first and the third sectors here, apart from the heavy braking zones you mentioned, are pretty much flat out the entire way through the full sectors. So the real differentiator in qualifying is that middle part of the lap as well. Whether you've gone for maybe something a little bit more high downforce, something a little bit more low downforce, that can really affect your middle part of the lap. And it seems that a lot of drivers are able to match each other in the middle part of the lap because they had such an incredibly close qualifying session. But we're getting ready then for the start of the 7th round of the season, and looking to the drivers, every single driver in the field has gone for a set of full wet tyres, as you would expect in these conditions. It is torrential rain by the looks of things out here. There is standing water absolutely everywhere. I think even taking a risk of intermediates, even if it does dry out in 5 laps time, taking the risk of going on a set of intermediates in these conditions is just too big of a risk, and you can't play that big of a risk, especially if you're inside the top 10. So we'll wait and see how quickly it does dry out, but looking at these conditions already on board with Campbell, absolutely tipping it down, and Campbell can barely keep it on the road on the formation lap.
Yeah, if you want a really good idea of how bad the conditions are, I was just on board with Matthias as he was stuck behind Campbell. He has dropped back a bit further now. He could not see a thing, and they were going nowhere near full speed. The spray is going to be so difficult around this circuit. Going back to the tyre choices, everyone is on the full wets, that makes complete sense. They'll probably leave it longer than you normally would going from intermediates to wet to change onto the tyres than you would from wet to intermediates, because you're comfortable on the tyres that you're on. You're always used to how they are reacting in those conditions, and even if they are maybe in pure pace, half a second to a second slower on that lap, the wet tyres will probably give you that bit more confidence that you can just push a bit harder at certain points of the circuit and the car won't feel as squirrely and wanting to break away from you. These wet tyres could stay for a long time just yet. And going back to the other point, unless we see the rain lighten in the next 5 laps perhaps. Wouldn't surprise me if it's some form of wet tyres, either these or the intermediates, all the way to the end.
Yeah, it's really going to have to dry out quite quickly for anything to really come of the slick tyres in this race. Before we get going though, for the start of the 7th round, Luke, I'm going to ask you the question that no one seems to like to answer. Who is your prediction for race victor today?
Well, I'm going to take a LOE mark on his word that Verstappen is decent in the wet. I'm going to take him maybe to get the race victory. I think I'm going to go for a QVR 1-2. And in 3rd position, I'm going to go for Bianchi. I think he can work his way up the order.
Yeah, I think Verstappen's definitely a safe bet in these wet conditions. Campbell as well to be on the podium. I've got my eye on Daniel though in these conditions as well. I know him from other league races in the wet conditions to be very strong. So I got my eye on maybe Leonis to get back on the podium here today. But we're getting ready for the start of the 7th round of the season. Here come the lights then. Ahead of the drivers, it's Campbell and Matthias on the front row. Who gets the best start? Lights are out fairly quickly and away they go. It's an even start at the front of the field. Campbell though sliding all over the place in the second phase of the start. Can Matthias capitalise on it around the outside? It's not quite close enough to try and take the lead away. So Campbell survives down towards La Source, but now it's the run through Eau Rouge that's really good. Zario and Verstappen running side by side, and Verstappen's going to get into 3rd place for Eau Rouge. He gets the move done. Verstappen already making moves in these conditions. Everyone very gingered through that corner as they head now down towards the Les Comtes chicane, and Verstappen looking to make another move. Maybe he's tucked up behind Matthias, but not quite close enough. Heading in towards the chicane. Daniel now trying to have a look on Zario in towards Les Comtes, not quite close enough. Further back, Rage is under pressure from Morgan, who's trying to go around the outside of the second part of the Les Comtes chicane. It's at the inside for Malmedy. He cuts across the curb on the inside, and Rage is still there around the outside, and Rage uses the RS to pull in front of Morgan down towards the hairpin, so he will get that 7th place. Rage up a place while his teammate has dropped a place at the start, but throughout the field fairly clean. I think someone towards the back of the field did pick up a bit of front wing damage at the first corner. Didn't quite see who that was. I think it actually might have been J. Cole that might have picked that damage up. One of the XL drivers I think was in the wall. J. Cole hasn't got damage. Maybe it was Gary a bit further up. It was actually Gary. Gary, the lead XL driver, already with front wing damage.
Yeah, XL drivers are in a bit in the wars as well, because I think I've just seen Sneaky tap the back of J. Cole and lose part of his front wing. So while it's not gone too well for one of the QVR Academy drivers, it's gone very well for the 2 in the main team. Campbell in the lead, Verstappen in 3rd place. Campbell doing well to hold on to that lead. Matthias tried it around the outside, but in these conditions, that's going to be very difficult indeed, as I think Zavio has done what you said in qualifying and found Paul Frere a bit hard in the wet conditions here. And you've got Bianchi there thinking about a move all the way round the outside of Blanchimont. That's brave enough in the dry conditions, never mind in the wet for now. But Daniel moving up a position as well. End of the first lap though, Campbell will be pretty happy with how he's doing. He's got a fairly comfortable gap back to Matthias, and there we go, 2 minutes 1 second with a good 15 seconds off what you'd be expecting to see in the full dry conditions.
Yeah, well off the pace as into the pit lane becomes Noisy after a great qualifying session for the Academy team. Noisy is now in the pit lane with to change that front wing. Unfortunately, Gary deciding to stay out in these conditions. I don't think he wants to take the risk of pitting now and then it may be drying out in a few laps time. Daniel looking pretty fast in these conditions. Got the move done on Zario after that little mistake and was tucked right up behind Verstappen already by the time they got to the bus stop. So Daniel looking pretty strong up into 4th place. Zario though, once again in these wet conditions at the start of the race, just doesn't have the confidence. Set the car up nicely for qualifying, but in the wet he just doesn't seem to be able to keep the car on the road, the same as people around him. Now Bianchi trying to get the move done on the VER driver to get up inside the top 5. It'll then be a VER 6-7 if it goes like that, as Scuderia Seb has actually made his way past Morgan now. So Scuderia Seb making his way forward. His teammate runs in 2nd. Scuderia Seb now up into 8th place as the Vapor team drop now down into 9th and 10th. So not been a great start to the race for Morgan either. He's already down 2 places. Jorga's down a place in this race. He's dropped behind Kazakhs at the start of this one. So it's been a bit of an up and down inside the top 10 so far. But at the front, Campbell looking strong, Matthias looking strong as well. Verstappen, you've got to say, actually looks like the one that's struggling the most outside in the top 4 in terms of these wet conditions.
Yeah, you don't really want to follow us close in these wet conditions. You need a downforce even more in the corners, and we've already mentioned how you can barely see anything. There looks to be a bit of a drying line out on the circuit at this moment in time. If there was a safety car in the next couple of laps, and I was one of these drivers, I'd be thinking about coming in and putting on a set of the intermediates. You might find it very difficult under the safety car, but who knows, when the safety car comes in, you might just be on the right tyres. Hopefully, though, we don't get one. Hopefully, the race carries on nice and clean at this moment in time, but it is definitely something for these drivers to think about, that even despite the torrential rain, there's not really loads of standing water on the racing line at this moment in time, and this is a better indication of how slow they are going compared to dry pace. 1:57, so we're talking about 12 seconds off the optimum pace. Reckon if they find a few more seconds on these tyres, we'll be seeing the intermediates used.
Yeah, and exactly, if you pit under the safety car, lose 5 seconds maybe in the opening few laps, but that's worth it instead of losing 20 for a pit stop under green flag conditions, so it may be worth doing it. Like you say, Zario went very deep into the Lasor segment, but Bianchi just wasn't close enough to capitalise on it. He's not going to be able to get the run though down towards the Lecom as well, because of course, no DRS in these conditions. Jaco working his way back up the field now. He's past Slash, who drops down into 16th place. Not been a good start to the race, unfortunately, for Slash in this one. He's dropped since the qualifying. And I don't know if he's picked up a little bit of front wing damage on the front of that car. He hasn't actually, but he's just struggling in these conditions. Unfortunately, Zach has worked his way up nicely in the second Leonis car. He's now up into 14th place behind Gary, who's still struggling around with that front wing damage. And he's starting to cause a little bit of a train to form behind him. Maledictus in front of him in 12, passed him a lap ago and is already nearly 2 seconds up the road. So whilst it's worth Gary staying out now and waiting for the intermediate conditions, you can already see how much time he is dropping.
Yeah, he's really struggling. You can see him there just running wide slightly out of Puhan. You can afford to get away with that without A, spinning, and B, getting a penalty at this moment in time. It's probably a good job that it is raining a bit, because obviously with no DRS, it is going to be a lot tougher for drivers to pass, and they're not going to be able to just absolutely floor it through a rouge, go flat out, without possibly having a huge accident. Remember in the 90s, it was Villeneuve and Zonta driving for VAR. Both pretty much dared each other that they could do it flat out. And that was in the dry. Turns out they couldn't do it flat out. It was quite an expensive day for the Brackley-based team. I'm just on board with Zach at the moment. He's really closing up to Gary at this moment in time. I wonder whether he'll think about sending one down the inside into the bus stop chicane here. Gary's left the door open ever so slightly, and Zach, I think, almost thought about it there, just didn't quite have the grip on the brakes to get that manoeuvre done.
Yeah, I think he's just waiting for the right opportunity, it seems, at this point, as he gets a really poor exit though out of the bus stop. Jacob behind him though, equally as poor, so and the second XL car behind. I think Zach now has realised that he's just got to try and get this move done. Gary's not really got the grip or the downforce to really fight back if he goes for a move. You've got to say at this point in the race as well, the actual rain has died out quite quickly. The dry line is starting to dry up a little bit more now. The standing water is becoming less of an issue, and the rain coming down is nowhere near as heavy as it was at the start of the race, so I don't think that far off getting to the intermediate conditions. And again, Slash losing another place coming up through Eau Rouge. He's passed now by Sneaky. 2 laps in a row now that Slash has been passed coming out of Eau Rouge. So it seems that Slash may be running a setup that's so tailored to the dry conditions that he can barely get the car up the hill through Eau Rouge and Rayon.
I'm wondering if it was the opposite, actually. I was just on board with him then when he was behind Sneaky. Neither of the cars were in overtake. There's about 4 or 5 miles per hour difference between the two cars. So whether he's just gone too much downforce, hoping that the rain might just carry on a tiny bit longer, doing... he'd be faster in the middle sector, but if he's stuck behind another car, he probably can't use that pace in the middle sector. Then he's just finding it really difficult heading down the straights. As again, Gary running wide through Pouon, and this time Zach is going to be very close indeed. The campus chicane, not a conventional overtaking point in the dry. I don't think we're going to see one here in the wet, but Zach's going to be getting pretty impatient soon to try and get ahead of Gary, who could well be the first driver to come in for the intermediate tyres.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if he is the first, but you can already see Gary now 4 seconds behind Maledictus. The gap is just increasing lap by lap by lap. And there's a big queue of cars now forming behind Gary, who's just really struggling for pace. Zach now on his ERS field. Verstappen under pressure from Daniel all of a sudden. Daniel's got the move done on Verstappen. It seems Verstappen, I think, has made a little bit of a mistake. Daniel is now 8 seconds behind Verstappen. A little bit of a mistake maybe through Blanchimon, and that has Daniel up into 3rd place, and we've already got our first drivers into the pit lane. Kazakhs into the pit lane, followed in, I think, by Gary. Like you said, he is all as well. So 2 drivers into the pit lane, probably for a set of intermediate compound tyres. And for Kazakhs, currently was running in 10th place before that pit stop. This could be very crucial for his race. If he can perform a really strong outlap on these intermediate tyres, he could jump a number of positions.
Yes, definitely. The thing is about this circuit, it is so long, you've really got to get the timing right. If you maybe wait for Jeff to tell you, oh, it's ready for the intermediate tyres, if that message comes as you're heading through Eau Rouge, you've got another 1 minute 30 seconds of flat out driving at least before you're heading round to the pits, and you could easily lose yourself a lot of time. There is a dry line appearing on track at the moment, so the intermediates could well be fairly quick. They run offline. I think they might struggle slightly. This could definitely get Kazakhs and XL Gary back up the field. They've not had the greatest of starts to this race. Now we'll see what they can do. And I'll just keep an eye on their second sector times, because I think that's when we'll really see the difference those intermediate tyres can make.
Yeah, it is really going to be the difference, like you say. What can Kazix do? The problem for Kazix, though, he is now tucked up behind OWR Shumi. So he has got a bit of traffic in front of him in the shape of that OWR car. So that is going to cost him a little bit as Campbell there, just coming out the campus chicane. A little bit of a wobble just before Savalo gets away with it. But you can see now the track is really starting to dry up. It is definitely more tailored now towards intermediate conditions. Matthias running comfortably in second place. Made that mistake and Daniel's passed him. He's got a bit of a gap back to third place, but Daniel all of a sudden started to come alive a little bit in that Leonis car, up from 5th place on the grid, now running in 3rd, starting to close down Matthias in front and dropping Verstappen behind. So Daniel looking very strong in these conditions. Now it's all about when these drivers pit, and into the pit lane comes our race leader. Matthias is into the pit lane, Daniel's also in, everyone is coming into this. Does anyone choose to stay out? And of course the problem now as well is any of these drivers' teammates coming into the pit lane, because that could really cost these guys. Literally everyone though is coming into the pit, so no one deciding to stay out. Is definitely intermediate conditions. Can Campbell hold on to the net race lead coming out of the pit lane? I think he has been able to hold on. Matthias has held on to second place, Daniel's held on to third, and Verstappen's held on to fourth. So the order remains relatively unchanged as they come out the pit lane. It all depends on where Kazix is in relation to them, and Kazix coming through the source hairpin now, comes out of the corner. He was running in a net P10. He has jumped a few drivers in the pit lane. He's jumped his teammate, he's jumped Bianchi, who's had a terrible pit stop, and he's jumped Scuderia Seb up into 7th. So that one lap undercut for Kazix worked beautifully.
Yeah, it's worked well for Gary as well, actually. He's going to be pretty close with Zach and Felgen on the exit. In the end, he is behind Zach, but gets ahead of Felgen as Daniel's got ahead of Matthias, so he had a really good pit stop as well. Was about to say, on that lap, Kazix was pretty much identical to these guys on the intermediate tyres as they were doing on the wets, but he was stuck behind Schumi for quite a bit of time there, so you can say he's easily lost half a second or a second. These intermediates are the best tyres to be on. Even if it keeps at this intensity though, it's going to be a bit of a struggle to get them towards the end of the race, so that could be interesting if it carries on raining for quite a bit longer. Wouldn't be surprising now though to see some dry conditions and the drivers just trying to manage the intermediates until it gets to that point.
Yeah, and Jordan now the first person to pick up a time penalty in these wet conditions. It is relatively easy to do so. A few corners here that you can run wide and pick up a warning for. Jordan the first person to do that and pick up a penalty. But once again, Daniel, the man on the move, is up ahead now of Matthias, up into second place after a great run up towards the Les Combes chicane. 2.6 second gap now to Campbell. Campbell's looked pretty comfortable at the front of the field so far. One thing to note though, Daniel coming out of Curve Paul Frere had almost 100% ERS. So while he's been overtaking people left, right and centre in these last few laps, he's not used his ERS needing to do so. Campbell's got a bit less than him, so it looks like Daniel, to perform the same amount of speed as our race leader, isn't having to push as much. So maybe if Daniel can get the gap down towards Campbell, he could be a real threat for the race victory. Yeah,
maybe he could indeed. He seems to have gained about half a second on this lap already, so doing a pretty good job. We'll get an idea now. Kazak's doing a 1:56.724, so only slightly faster than what they were doing on the wet tyres, but they will be feeling, I reckon, a lot more comfortable. The wets would have just got to the point where you're having to search for standing water, and once they start overheating, you're pretty much done. You burn the tread out of the tyres and you'll have to come into the pits for a new set almost instantly. We've seen other drivers do it. I think Gasly at Hockenheim in 2018 is a recent memory of a driver in real life using wet tyres on a fairly dry track, and he had no grip whatsoever. He might as well have been on ice. Maybe Daniel's just got the car set up slightly better for the drier conditions. I know Campbell, I think in the end, did actually qualify, of course, on pole position ahead of Daniel, who was in 5th place. It's all about driver ability, how they feel comfortable in certain conditions. Maybe Daniel's just enjoying getting used to these intermediates a bit quicker, and when the driver's bedded into the tyres a bit more, we might see the pace differences just shrink ever so slightly.
Yeah, that may be the case. Yeah, like you say, maybe Daniel is just able to get used to the conditions a bit faster. The gap now down to 1.9 seconds. Matthias isn't that far back either, so it is starting to litter Constantino up just a bit at the front of the field. They have dropped Zario a little bit, but Zario now running comfortably in 5th place, unlike in Silverstone this time. in the race at Silverstone a month ago, he was spun towards the back of the field. He now runs in 5th place, all on his own a little bit, but ahead of his teammate who now runs in 6th place. That's Rage running in 6th place. So far, I'll say I touch wood, I don't want to curse these guys, but for Virtual Esports Racing, it's been a good race so far. Hopefully they can hold this towards the end of the race, and if they can, that would be their best result of the season so far, and it could jump them right into the battle for 4th place in the standings. Behind Rage though, Kazakh's now coming under a bit of pressure from Scuderia Seb and Bianchi especially, who's trying to make up for that poor pit stop. Was running in P5 before the pit stops happened, now runs down in P9, and this once again a race where QVR have a massive opportunity at extending their championship lead. It got cut in half at Silverstone. They now run 1st and 4th, while the TTG team, who run 3rd in the standings, run in 9th and 15th, and Excel run in 14th and 17th. So all of a sudden, while the lead was cut last time out and QVR looked under a bit of pressure, all of a sudden the pendulum could be swinging back towards them in an even bigger way.
Yeah, might be swinging even more here. Excel Gavi is into the pits once again. I wonder if he's made a mistake somewhere and broken his front wing, so he's going to be a long way down on the back of the field. As long as he carries on though, he will get at least 1 point, but everyone's doing fantastically well at the moment, just keeping it on track. And whereas QVR might be extending their lead in the championship, their academy team are currently in 4th in the championship. They're 12th and 13th in the race. Leonis, who are 5th, have got Daniel in 2nd position. International Racing Team, who are 6th, have got both their drivers in the top 8. We've already spoken about Virtual Esports with both their drivers in 5th and 6th. So the battle for 4th in the championship, sort of the almost B League that we've got within League 1 at the moment, as there is quite a gap between TTG and Clean Vigour Academy. That battle for 4th is really going to get tasty in the championship with only 3 races to go after tonight.
It really is, yeah. An international race, you've got to say the ones to really look out for. They had a bit of a slow start to the season when they were OSRL. Obviously a name change last time out at Silverstone, but they have been on the up every single round really since the midpoint of the season. It's just gone up and up and up for them, as Zach is now the 4th driver to pick up a time penalty in that middle part of the lap. So that is Sneaky, J. Cole, Jorg and Zach now with time penalties in their race. They're a bit further down the field at the moment, so it's not really affecting the battle at the front. Speaking of the battle at the front though, Daniel still absolutely flying. The gap now down to 1.1 seconds between himself and Campbell, and still Daniel has a lot of ERS in his back pocket, up to 75% coming through the bus stop. Campbell down towards 30 and is still using his down the pit straight. So Daniel looking incredibly fast. Campbell, at least on the intermediates, not looking as strong, and the problem here as well for Campbell is that Daniel is dragging Matthias and Verstappen with him.
Yeah, I'm starting to think it's not just strength from Daniel, as further back down the order, Bianchi and Scuderia Seb are battling for 8th and 9th place. Bianca on the outside coming out of La Source. He's going to use his ERS to try and get alongside before Rouge. This is going to be an absolutely fantastic move if he can pull it off. Is he going to be ahead before Vadion? Brilliant manoeuvre there from Bianchi. He gets himself a 3-second time penalty. Slightly bittersweet, but I think he'll be very happy with that one, and fair play to Scuderia Seb for giving him the room. Back to the battle for the lead of the race though. I think it is more just Campbell just struggling ever so slightly with that low ERS. He probably can't use it on the straights anywhere near as much as he wants, and that might be part of what's allowing Daniel, Matthias and Verstappen to close that gap up. But he's lost about 2 seconds in 3 laps here. He does not look to be enjoying these intermediate conditions.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether in qualifying, even though he did qualify on pole position, I'm wondering whether he still set that car up a bit more for the wet conditions, expecting it to be a bit wetter for longer, and it's just not been the case so far. As the track has dried, the gap has only shrunken even more, so wondering if that is the case. Matthias still looking strong in 3rd as well, despite losing that 2nd place to Daniel. Matthias still running nicely at the front of the field. Verstappen still tucked in 4th, I think just waiting really for something to happen in front now. He's not quite had the pace in the wet conditions, in the full wet conditions at least, to really challenge his teammate at the front, but in the intermediate conditions that pendulum might be swinging, and still the VER drivers run very much on their own in 5th and 6th place. Kazakh's now got a bit of breathing space between himself and Bianchi after that battle between Bianchi and Scuderia Seb. Morgan rounds off the top 10, so both Vapor cars inside the top 10 as it stands. That could be a real boost for them in their championship as well. Currently down in 9th place. They've had a lot of drivers qualify inside the top 10 and run at the front of the field. The race just never seems to pan out for them. They never seem to get the results from what could be a really strong qualifying. They have so much potential and it never really pans out for them, so this could be a great opportunity for them to try and move themselves up the field just a little bit. All running in 11th place at the moment, starting to close back in on these guys in front after a bit of a poor pit stop for him as well. So that's a run through at the moment of the top 11, 12 down, very separated from the rest of the field. Maledictus currently running in 12th, ahead of his QVR Academy teammate Sneaky in 13th, who's got J. Cole and Slash tucked right underneath him, but still XL haven't made any marches forwards. J. Cole out of that queue that was forming behind his teammate. Now that he's out of that queue, he still is yet to make any progress.
Yeah, just trying to do some maths really quickly here at this moment in time. If things stayed as they are, TTG would close the gap for second place in the championship to just 2 points all of a sudden. And Bianchi, he's looked pretty quick now that he's got ahead of Seb. Yes, he has got a penalty, and that doesn't take into account the penalty. But we'll just have to see what can happen here, because obviously if Slash gets ahead of J. Cole, they'll be almost tied in the championship. And maybe for whatever reason, they haven't been able to send out their strongest lineup tonight. Obviously 2 completely different drivers to what they had last time around, where they got a double podium at Silverstone. And if Gary, who has had a podium this season, and J. Cole were hoping to maybe put a bit of a stamp on having a chance of holding this seat for future races, it's not quite gone to plan.
Yeah, it really hasn't gone to plan. And you've got to say that as well, it's incredibly bizarre considering the fact that Silverstone was almost, in terms of conditions-wise, almost an identical race to this one. We had very similar conditions in Silverstone. XL dominated last time out. Dotamo in the TTG car was the only person that could get near them. And this time around, they're running towards the back of the field. It is such a weird shift in pace for the XL team. And you've got to say as well, one of the reasons why QVR have been so strong in this championship is they've had pretty much the same lineup from the start of the season. They've kind of intertwined between 4 different drivers in the shape of Verstappen, Campbell, T1000 Zach and Koen Bly, and all 4 of them have performed whenever they've been in the car. So that is one thing that's definitely played into their hands. And speaking of QVR performing, Verstappen all of a sudden tucked right underneath Matthias's rear wing, maybe looking for a move to get up onto the podium. So it's all starting to kick off a little bit now inside the top 4. And looking at the track conditions, I tell you what, we aren't far away now from slick conditions. We're only halfway through this race when we finish this lap, and my word, the track has dried out incredibly quickly.
Yeah, it has indeed. I think we will be seeing soft tyres at the end of this race, and that is going to be absolutely fantastic, especially once the DRS comes into play. And Campbell, he's not got any ERS to really defend with. If that comes, not for a while, yeah, at least for another 3 or 4 laps, even if the rain did stop on this lap, he might find himself in trouble later on the race. At least, though, he's kept it clean. That can be said for all of the top 7 at the moment. Bianchi, Jorg, Sneaky, J. Cole and Zach, all with time penalties at this moment in time, especially with how close it is in some of those lower positions at the moment. For example, J. Cole only half a second ahead of Slash, Sneaky only a second ahead of Slash himself, Bianchi not too far ahead of Seb and Morgan, and now Gary picking up a time penalty as he's down in 19th place. Could have a big say towards the end of the race. It's been clean so far, but penalties are always really crucial to keep it clean. If we do get a late safety car, you're really going to suffer.
Yeah, you really are going to suffer as well, especially with Bianchi up there in P8 at the moment. The points for him, but at the moment, if the race were to finish now, he is going to drop behind Scooter with Seb and Morgan, and possibly Jorg. Jorg is starting to close in on these drivers in front. He's only about 3.7 seconds back from Bianchi, so if Bianchi can't get a move on and get, then he could lose another place. And speaking of that move, Bianchi is tucked right underneath the rear wing now of Kazuks, who's lost a little bit of pace on these intermediate tyres. It was a great strategy to come in a lap earlier than everyone else. It got him up the field, but now all the in the pits are tucked right underneath him. So can Bianchi think about getting a move done after the virtual racing cars in front? He's not going to be close enough down towards the source. It's a poor run out of the bus stop chicane. What is his run like though? Out the source and up through Eau Rouge and Radion. Is he going to be close enough to think about going for a move? Although cut to the top 2, because I think Daniel is thinking about a move here for the race lead. He's gone right, using all of the ERS that he has in reserve. He's looking for a move on Campbell. It's going to have to be a late move on the brakes. Campbell's going to move to the inside. Daniel's going to try the outside line. Campbell forcing him right onto the curb. There's barely any room between the 2 of them. Campbell just about holds on. Aggressive but fair from Campbell. He just about holds on to the race lead, but Daniel now looking increasingly fast in this race, really starting to put the pressure on.
Yeah, it was hard but fair from Campbell. Whether Daniel saw it that way, we'll have to wait and see, but I'm sure that's maybe ignited a bit of fire inside him as he's going to try and work his way up the order. Zach and Slash battling for 15th and 16th place. Slash getting ahead of Zach at this moment in time, so he seems to have dropped back a slight bit from J. Cole, and Zario was just closing in ever so slightly to those drivers ahead of him at one point. He might as well be one of those drivers to risk going for the slicks, maybe a lap earlier than everyone else, because he's 2.2 seconds ahead of his teammate, so it's not too big of a problem if he loses a place to him. He's 5 seconds ahead of Kasu, 5.5 ahead of Bianchi, who's got a penalty. Maybe Zario, in a couple of laps' time, as it has stopped raining now, will be one of the first drivers to go onto a set of probably soft tyres, and that could well get him right into the battle for the win in this race.
Yeah, well, if we're going to see anyone towards the back of the field actually pit at the end of this lap, because there was barely any spray coming on intermediate tyres. Like you said earlier on, this track is so long that if you wait to pit and you get a call now, say, for the slick tyres, then you have to run a full lap in this track with aging intermediate tyres that are only going to overheat in these conditions. And once again, Kazu is the same driver again, comes in early, in for the pit. So, Kazu doing the same thing he did from the wets to the intermediates. It worked nicely the first time. Is it going to work nicely the second time? He's followed in by his Vapor teammate Morgan, and Jorg has also come into the pit lane for the TTG Academy team as well. In fact, everyone towards the back of the field is now starting to come in, and DRS has been enabled. And all of the top 8 now, top 9, even top 10 of Jayco in this race, all deciding to stay out, have got to do basically a full lap on aging intermediate tyres. This could work beautifully into Kazu's hands.
Yeah, it could do indeed. There's a few drivers coming in and putting on the medium tyres. I thought you might as well just go for the soft tyres. They should be able to do 10 laps fairly comfortably, so I am surprised to see that. We did have Mark say if Gary takes 4.5 seconds out of Campbell, he could end up winning this race. He might take 4.5 seconds out on this lap all of a sudden in the wet conditions. We'll have to just wait and see. There's a yellow flag there, I think, in the pit lane. Drivers just taking it, obviously, very steady. It won't be anywhere near as dry in the pit lane as it is out on track, as there's not been really anyone running too regularly in the pit lane. Surely now the front 10 drivers are all going to come in. How much time will this have cost them staying out for that one extra lap? DRS is enabled. There's pretty much no water whatsoever out on track, and maybe again Kasu can try his work his way further up the order.
Yeah, Kasu at the moment in the middle sector is absolutely flying. This is a great opportunity for Kasu to maybe jump. Maybe both of the virtual esports racing drivers. Zario on this last lap has caught the top 4, so he's caught right up to them immediately as we were talking about it. He's now already taken a second out of them, so all of a sudden as it dries out, it's starting to come back towards Zario, and maybe Zario is one of these drivers that went for a dry setup. We saw people maybe going for something a bit closer to the wet conditions, maybe help them at the start of the race, maybe those that compromised and went for a drier setup for the car to come to the front of the field at the end of the race. So this could really play nicely for Zario. We count him out maybe at the start of this race. He could be right back in it as everyone then into the pit lane. Campbell, I think, a little bit held in his box. I wonder if he's going to get away with that. I think he does just about get away with it. The top 5 stay as they are in the pit lane. A little bit of a hold there, but out on a net P2. Where is Kazu in relation to these guys? He's coming down towards the source once again, goes through the first corner, and I think he's going to jump Rage here. Oh no, he's going to be just behind. No, he is going to jump Rage, so he has jumped Rage by coming in a lap earlier, and once again Kazu, the lead on the strategy, gets up into 6th place, Rage down to 7th, and Morgan has jumped Bianchi and Scuderia Zeb. So both of the Vapor Esports drivers coming in a lap earlier. It's worked beautifully for them.
Yeah, it has indeed. This DRS might work beautifully though for Rage. He just sails past Kasu here into 6th position. So much overspeed there. Kasu was 1.5 seconds faster than the leaders on that lap in the middle sector, so comfortably the best time to pit. And I'm surprised none of the leaders didn't just think, maybe now I should come in. They wouldn't have seen any spray, but perhaps they were just taking it more conventionally. It normally takes longer to dry up. That's always a risk, predicting what can happen with the weather. They don't always get it right, and the same thing doesn't tend to happen quite a few times. Now we've got a 5-way battle for the lead of this race. This is going to get very interesting indeed. Campbell seems to have recovered his ERS ever so slightly, and he's actually pulling away from Daniel. He's got that gap up to over a second. Could Daniel be in trouble for Matthias Verstappen and Zario?
Maybe, yeah. Is Daniel the one that went for a bit more of a wet setup, and it's going to affect him in the latter stages of the race? Matthias looking very fast at this point in the race, trying to get a move done. But Daniel similarly is using a lot of his DRS, I think, to try and get back in with DRS range of Campbell in front. DRS, obviously, on this game, quite powerful, and it can really help you if you stay inside the DRS range of the driver in front. So Daniel just trying to do that now as he's got DRS down towards the source hairpin. So DRS now is now available for all the drivers on the top 5, all still within a chance of winning this race, and we can't count either Rage or Kazu out of this one. They aren't far back, only 2 seconds from Rage to his teammate. Morgan sets the fastest lap of the race, currently running in 8th place. Bianchi just behind him on the road with Scuderia Seb in 10th. Hawg is the lead driver on the medium compound tyres, so he's going to get to the end of the race race, no problem whatsoever, but he is going to struggle for pace compared to the likes of Sneaky and Maledictus behind him on the road. Zach now with the fastest lap of the race, but the race is only going to get faster as towards the front of the field. Daniel in the DRS isn't close enough for a move down towards Lecom. Same for Matthias, same for Verstappen, but further back, Bianchi is going to get the move done on Morgan fairly easily down that back straight of the Kemmel straight, gets the move done well before Lecom, and that just goes to show that when the move comes, maybe for the likes of Daniel and Matthias, so far DRS passing looks incredibly easy.
Yeah, it looks like they've widened the slot gap to a gaping chasm all of a sudden with the amount of drag that's been reduced by it at this moment in time. Fantastic. Well, fantastically easy, I should say, for both Bianchi and Rage to get ahead of the two Vapor drivers. Now, whether that's part of Vapor's setup and they're a bit slower in a straight line, we'll have to wait and see how things go in this race. But they didn't really do too badly in qualifying. Now Daniel seems to have got those tyres where he wants them. He's able to stay a bit closer to Campbell. Campbell's probably going to have to use a lot of his ERS to try and get away from these drivers. I wonder if it's worth him maybe just taking a risk here, burning through it on one lap to try and break that 1 second window, because that could be crucial.
It could be crucial, like you say. Is he going to take that risk, or does he just sit at the front of the queue and try and hold Daniel at maybe a 6th or 7th gap, so he's not quite close enough to pounce on the DRS down towards the bus stop chicane? Look how late on the brakes Daniel was there for the first part of that chicane. Gets car stopped very, very nicely indeed. And Daniel sets the fastest lap of the race. That's immediately beaten by Verstappen, who's then beaten by Zario, and then is beaten by Rage. So all of a sudden, the drivers a bit further down are coming to life in this race. Bianchi with the fastest lap of the race, as you would expect with all that DRS. Rage is closing in on his teammates, so we could have a 6-way battle for the lead. In a short while, we could see a 6-way battle for the lead, and I think Daniel is going to go for the move this time. It's only 0.3 of a second. We've seen how powerful DRS is as he's coming down towards the Lecom chicane. Daniel's going to go to the outside line once again around the outside, but this time decides not to go for it. Campbell incredibly late on the brakes, just about keeps the car on the road. But if Daniel would use just a little bit more ERS there, surely he should have been able to get that move done.
Yeah, you'd have thought so as well. Bianchi's fastest lap was astounding. It was 0.8 faster than any of the drivers in front of him. The closest person on track to him last time around was Jacob in terms of pace with a 1:44.666. Bianchi is absolutely flying at this moment in time. It's such a shame for him, obviously, that he's got that penalty, but that might not make a difference if he carries on at this pace. He might even be able to catch up to Casu and pass him out on track. Probably not because of the penalties, though. Daniel has twice gone for the outside line into Lecom, and twice it hasn't worked. He's got to try something different, I'm afraid, because Campbell is now going to be very wise to that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that seems to be Daniel's signature move. I think if he wants to go for that outside line now, he's going to have to make sure that he's well ahead going into the corner. Both times he's been behind Campbell going into Lecom, and Campbell has simply just shut the door on Daniel. So Daniel's got to be a bit more aggressive here as he used a bit of his ERS to close in on the back of Campbell. Campbell now running with barely any ERS at all. He was actually he was running out of power there. You could see his battery recharging down towards the bus stop chicane. So it's looking more and more likely that Daniel's going to have a run here. It's only 0.4 to come in towards the source. How was the run out of the La Source hairpin? Is Bianchi again the fastest lap of a race? 44 flat for the second lap in a row. So even without DRS, Bianchi is absolutely flying. It's all Constantinoing up at the front of the field because now all of a sudden Rage is within DRS range of his teammate. And now here comes Daniel for the net race lead here. He's going to have a look to the inside line this time around. Campbell squeezes him right to the grass, but Daniel just about finds a gap down the inside line, and Campbell just doesn't have the straight line speed to fight it. Daniel, it's been a long time coming, but he's got the move done. Daniel into the lead of the race for Leonis. Campbell held on for as long as he could, but just doesn't seem to have the pace to hold on any longer.
No, he doesn't. He might be able to use the DRS, though, to recover his ERS and have a go in the final couple of laps, if he can stay close enough. Matthias and Verstappen, they're obviously in between. They're not really able to do much. Zavio's dropped back ever so slightly. Whether he's made a slight mistake or not, I'm not quite so sure, but that's allowed Rage to close up ever so slightly. Casu and Bianchi not too far behind. It's still been a very close race at the moment. Battles to watch further back. York could be under a bit of trouble from Maledictus soon. He is on those medium tyres. He has got a penalty anyway, but don't be surprised if the QVR Academy driver is able to get past the TTG Academy driver.
Yeah, wouldn't be shocked if that is the case. Zario, though, fastest medal sector of the race there from Zario, gets himself back within DRS range, possibly of Verstappen in front. So I think maybe just a little mistake in the early part of the lap had dropped him out, and he's working his way back in. Kazu now in 7th place, running a little bit on his own, has been dropped by both the Virtual Esports drivers now. So he's back in that 7th place, but Bianchi still absolutely flying in 8th place. Like you say, it's such a shame he's got that penalty, and he had problems in the pit lane. If he hadn't had the problems in the pit lane in the first pit stops, who knows where Bianchi could have been in this race. Daniel, fastest lap of the race then, a 43.9, leads the way. That Campbell, though, well within DRS range behind. Can he now just sit behind and save his ERS? And is Daniel now going to have to use all of his ERS to try and hold on to the race he did? But I will say, Matthias is looking for a move now on Campbell, coming up towards Lecom. Campbell not got the best one. He's not got any ERS still when he's forcing Matthias onto the grass on the outside line. They come into contact. And again, Campbell with an aggressive defence, forcing people off the road. That time around, though, that was a step too far, surely, from Campbell. Matthias is going to be furious at that.
Yeah, there's hard but fair, and then there's just fully not leaving anyone any space. And the upshot of that is Verstappen's now been able to have a run at Matthias. I wonder, I'll be very surprised if that doesn't get taken as a stewards, because that did look like a bit of a very late, yes, you're just not coming past here, and now it's enabled Verstappen to get a position. So Matthias is going to be absolutely fuming about that. Ruined all his momentum because he's got an absolutely fantastic run as well. Will there be a swap between Campbell and Verstappen? Verstappen has got more ERS than his teammate. If these are communicating, I think it would be definitely worth a swap and then saying, right, Verstappen, if you get past Daniel, fair enough. If you don't, then give me the place back at the finish line.
Yeah, that could be the case, like you say, if that is what they're going to try and orchestrate for the rest of this race. Campbell's still running with barely any ERS. He can't close in enough on Daniel to think about going for a move. He doesn't have the ERS advantage that Daniel had a few laps ago, which helped him get the move done. But yeah, that might be looked into by the stewards, that incident there between Campbell and Matthias. Matthias surely probably could have had that move done. He was well alongside before they got to the mid part of the Kemmel Straight. So Matthias, I think, we're trying to think about getting his way back up the field, but now all of a sudden Matthias is going to be under pressure from Zario, who's caught right back up behind as well in that 5th place. Rage is just there in 6th as well. Kazu in 7th is now got pressure from Bianchi behind, who has caught DRS to the Vapor driver in front, and now Bianchi, I think, is thinking about a move already, as Campbell at the front of the field, I think, might be thinking of a move on Daniel coming up towards Lecom. He's tucked right in the slipstream. He's not using any VRS though. I think he's just going to sit behind Daniel for the time being and wait for the right moment to make his move. Daniel, since making the move, hasn't been able to pull away. Campbell can now just save his ERS as Bianchi, from 0.6 of a second back on the exit of the first corner, is going to look for a move on Kazu through the Lecom chicane. It's going to be down the inside for Malmedy, but it's not quite far off alongside. And Kazu holds on to the 7th place for the time being, doing enough at the moment for Vapor to possibly score a 7th and 8th place finish here if Bianchi can't get far enough ahead of Morgan. But Bianchi at the moment, you've got to say, probably the fastest driver on the track.
Yeah, he's absolutely flying. That penalty's really cost him in this race, because well, it depends how much Kazu wants to do some defending here, because he could help his teammate out quite a lot. I can't see Bianchi being able to get far ahead of Kazu, even with the pace at this moment in time. But if Kazu makes it very difficult and drives the widest car, although I think you're going to have to go some to beat Campbell's defending, then Bianchi might find it difficult to even pull out that 3 seconds he needs on Morgan. He's only 3.2 seconds ahead of Scooter VS7 at this moment in time. It's all calmed down at the lead of this race. I can't see it staying calm for too much longer. Overdriver's running fairly low on ERS in that front battle, apart from Zario, but there's no way he's going to be able to, as 5th man in the train, have a really realistic chance of getting here with Eikston. Just going to have to wait and see what's going to happen here. Are there going to be some teamwork between Campbell and Verstappen? Is Campbell just going to try and go for the winner of this race himself? And how hard's Daniel going to defend the lead? Because he was very close to being shoved on the grass earlier by the QVR driver.
Yeah, you've got to think as well, for QVR at this point in the race, they don't necessarily need to win this. They are pulling massive amount of points on Excel and TTG. If it stays like this, it's a great opportunity, especially with only 3 rounds to go in the championship once this race is finished. Further down though, Bianchi now going for the move once again on Kazu. This time though is a lot closer once the time the DRS is opened. He's down the inside and Kazu has nothing to fight with. Bianchi up into 7th place. Now it's all about whether Kazu can stay within that 3-second window and hold on to a 7th place finish in this race. Bianchi up into 7th. What could have been for him though, without that penalty and without the delay in the first pit stops, he could have been right at the front of the field battling for this race victory, which is a 6-way battle still, as Rage just holding on to DRS range of his teammate at the front of this field. Daniel still leading. Campbell, though, tucked right in behind. Campbell has saved a bit of ERS up now, so I'm wondering whether Campbell's just going to wait maybe for a last lap assault.
It's his best possible bet here. Daniel, he's got to think about how to play this here now. Whether he's too close to Verstappen, Matthias and Zario to play the tactic of, oh, I'm just going to lift off into La Source, let you take the lead and I'll just use your slipstream down the straight. Whether it's worth lifting off, it's a bit controversial, but lifting off a bit earlier on so Campbell catches you right at the top of Radion and he thinks, oh crikey, he has to lift off ever so slightly. That allows Daniel to get a free walk run. I don't know. He's going to have to think of something, though, because Campbell is really close behind him, and you know he's going to try and get this race victory.
Yeah, he really wants this one, as you can see. By the racing so far, Campbell has, I think, been pretty desperate to win this race. He's been right at the front all race long. No lower than second in this race so far has Campbell been. So is he going to think about a move maybe this time around? He's only 0.3 of a second back from Daniel. He's got ERS in his back pocket. He's using some of it through Eau Rouge and up through Radion. I think he's going to go for the move here as Daniel leads the race. Here comes Campbell then on his ERS coming down towards the Les Combes chicane. He's going to move to the outside line. Daniel defends to the inside, but Campbell with the extra straight line speed is just going to breeze past Daniel down towards the Les Combes chicane, and Campbell back into the lead of the race. We've still got a lap and a half to go though, so it's not over just yet. Now it's all about, can Campbell hold on to this race lead towards the end of this one, or can Daniel fight back and give Leonis their first victory of the season? Further down, the academy team moving up as Maledictus has got past Jorg and up into 11th place. He would have got the position on penalties anyway, but 11th place on the road now for Maledictus, but he is 7 seconds behind Scuderia Slip. That is the best that Maledictus is going to be able to hope for in this race, is 11th place. Campbell then up into the race lead. Now it's down to Daniel to try and do the same to Campbell as what Campbell just did to him.
Yeah, I think Campbell, at a few points on this lap, has been going pretty heavy on the ERS to try and break that 1 second window all of a sudden to Daniel, just to try and stop it happening. Otherwise, I'm not sure why you'd go for the move on the penultimate lap of this race if you know you're going to give the teammate, give your rival, I should say, the DRS going into the final lap of the race. We've already seen how easy some of the drivers have made it done. Not necessarily when they've been trying to pass Campbell, it's been easy, but you've seen Bianchi sail past cars earlier on, Rage sailing past Casu as well. Just hold on to your hats, people. This is going to be one hell of a final lap, I think. And you've still got Verstappen, Matthias and Zario. Zario really close to the back of Matthias and Verstappen. This could get very tasty.
It really could, as Campbell sets the fastest lap of the race on the penultimate lap. Daniel, though, incredibly late on the brakes in the bus stop, but I don't know if he's going to be close enough here. Coming down towards Eau Rouge and Radion, it's going to have to be a late lunge, I think, into Les Combes. Daniel doesn't have the ERS to really go for it. Campbell has no ERS at all as he comes up the top of Eau Rouge and Radion. Daniel then on the DRS. How good is the straight line speed in that car? He's going to move to the inside line down towards Les Combes. He's going to get it, and again Campbell moves Daniel to the grass, but there's just not enough that Campbell, it's not enough for Campbell. Daniel back down the inside towards Les Combes, and Daniel timed it perfectly. Campbell decided to go for the move on the penultimate lap. So far it's not been the right move because Daniel's taken advantage of the final lap and has gone up into the race lead. There's still half a lap to go, so Campbell could still win this race, but at the moment, as time is running out for Campbell, he's got to get the move done now or never, really.
Yeah, he has. The bus stop is the final opportunity, and it is the final corner, so you've got to go for it. Then he's running a bit low on ERS. He was about the same as Daniel at one point, so I think he is just using a tiny bit more to try and get closer. He's absolutely pushing at this moment in time. Daniel taking a bit too much grass maybe into Stavolo. This is going to be extremely close indeed. There's been a yellow flag up for Eau Rouge, but thankfully Sash has been able to carry on, so we should get all 20 cars finishing this race, and it looks like Daniel is going to do enough to claim the victory.
It does look like that. Matthias may be in fourth place, thinking possibly of a move on Verstappen down towards the bus stop, but it's not going to be close enough. We've got a 5-car queue coming into the bus stop, but Daniel from 5th on the grid, a great drive in the wet conditions, drove to the front of the field and has won this race for Leonis. It's Leonis' first win of this season. Campbell gets second place ahead of his teammate Verstappen, who gets third, so QVR extend the championship lead, but we don't know by how many points yet because there's possibility that Campbell might be under investigation for an incident with Matthias that all but costs Matthias a podium in this race, what could have been for him without that contact. VER get their best result of the season so far, Rage in 5th ahead of Zario in 6th, who had a penalty late on in the race. Kazu in 7th ahead of Bianchi in 8th, what could have been for him in this race. He although for Banky, he at least beats Morgan and Scuderia. Seb then in 10th, Morgan in 9th. That is the best joint result as well for Vapor so far this season, so a lot of teams getting their best results so far. What a race that was, changeable conditions, and in the end the dry conditions produced just as much drama as the wet conditions did, and Daniel, from 5th on the grid, drove through the drivers in front of him and got to the race victory.
Yeah, he had a really good start to the race. I think we saw a couple of drivers make some mistakes. I think Zario made a mistake that allowed Daniel through. Then Verstappen made one that allowed Daniel through. The intermediate stint is what did it for him and lost it for Campbell. Campbell just didn't seem to have the confidence on the intermediate tyres. The gap went down from around 3 seconds to within DRS range, and by the time the slick tyres came on, Daniel was able to use the DRS. It was fairly close between Campbell and Daniel, not as close as it was between Campbell and Matthias, but a great drive from Daniel to get the victory for Leonis, their first of the season, and drag them a bit further up in the championship.
Yeah, possible now for Leonis to maybe challenge QVR Academy for that 4th place in the standings, but the international team, both drivers inside the top 10, VER both drivers inside the top 10 as well, so that battle for 4th, like you mentioned earlier on, Luke, really heating up just as much as the championship battle at the front of the field was heating up before this race. But after that event, you've got to say now, with 3 rounds to go, it's going to take some bad luck for QVR and some amazing performances from both TTG and XL for them to knock QVR off the top spot.
Yeah, it is. Verstappen getting his 3rd podium of the season. That's now joint most of any driver in EML League One, alongside Shaw and Perpetuum. They'll be very happy with their performance. Even if Campbell gets a penalty, I couldn't see it being more than maybe a 5-second penalty. That would drop him down to 6th place. But it's still, I'm fairly certain, it still would be the best result that the team has got this time around. They'll be happy with how they've done. So Daniel just taking the victory in the end. Fantastic performance. You've got to say well done to everyone for getting to the checkered flag, especially in those tricky conditions in the first half.
Yeah, and it's good to see as well, for the people that did struggle in those wet conditions, continue on and finish the race instead of retiring in the pit lane. We do see that quite often, but this time around, everyone getting the points, like you say, that is great to see. But here's the full run through of the order then. It is Daniel that gets their first win of the season. Campbell ahead of Verstappen, 2 QVR drivers. Matthias in 4th for the 2nd race in a row ahead of Rage and Zario for VER. Then it's Kazu, Bianchi, Morgan, Scuderia, Seb rounds off the top 10. Maledictus ahead of Jorg. J. Cole, the lead XL driver, in 13th ahead of Sneaky. Zach, Noisy, Gary in 17th. Slash in 18th. Shumi and Felgen, the 2 OWR drivers, round off the finishers today. And while we had many teams getting their best performances of the season so far at the front, namely obviously VER and Vapor, we had a team getting probably their worst, well, easily their worst result of the season so far in XL. XL today never really seemed to have the pace to get anywhere near the top 10.
I don't think they can say that was anything other than disastrous. Really, just didn't really have any pace whatsoever. Like you said, QVR 2nd and 3rd position. Provisionally, we must add. We don't know whether there will be any stewards' inquiries, whereas you compare that to what XL are getting, 13th and 17th place. That is just, that is what, is it 12 points, I think, XL managed to get, compared to 42 points for QVR. That is a 29-point difference all of a sudden. That gap heading towards 50 points with 2 races to go. Even if XL get a 1-2 in both races, I think they're going to find it hard to stop QVR.
They really are, and now at this point in the championship as well, XL are starting to come under pressure for that 2nd place in the standings. TTG are starting to close in just a little bit as well. Slash didn't have the best race in 18th, but Bianchi had a somewhat decent race and showed great pace, picking up an 8th place finish, so that allows them to close in a little bit on the XL team in front. So heating up for 2nd place, but QVR once again bouncing back after a poor result where the gap closed for the championship lead, and it opened once again in the very next round. So this championship is far from over. We've still got a lot of racing left to go in this one. We've got 3 rounds to go until the end of May, which will be the final round of this championship. Next time out, we will be heading, I believe, to Monza and Italy for the next round of the championship, round 8 of the season. That is sure to be a crazy fun race to watch. Monza always provides absolutely insane racing, no matter what championship we seem to be in. It always provides something very, very interesting, and we thought the DRS trains and things like that are stronger at tracks like Belgium and things like that. It's going to be incredibly strong at Monza, and I'm sure that one is going to be a really, really close race, and maybe, much like today, Monza could throw up possibly a new race victor next time out.
It could indeed. Things do always seem to be really close at Monza. Penalties as well seem to cost you because of the DRS trains. Surely that's where you're going to see the teamwork in qualifying. Drivers are going to be trying everything to get that slipstream, because it's pretty much, you can go flat out around if it wasn't for the chicanes, apart from Lesbos, you won't really need to break that much from the Parabolica, but because that's where you'll see the overtaking into the chicanes. It will be a fantastic race, and there's always that little risk as well. Monza in the autumn, northern Italy, maybe we'll just get a tiny bit of rain, but I think these drivers will be praying for a dry race after two very tricky conditions in a row.
Yeah, I'm sure they will be praying for that. Like you say, we've had two incredibly difficult races back to back. Before we finish off, though, and we get ready for the Premier Division in 15 minutes' time, Luke, who was your driver and who was your team of the day?
Driver of the day, I've got to go for Daniel. The easy choice, I suppose, but a fantastic job as for the winner. Team of the day, just for where they are in the championship at the moment and how well they've done today, I've got to go for Vapor Esports. They were 9th in the championship going into today. Both of their drivers finishing in the top 9, so they'll be extremely happy with how they've done in the championship. I think they're probably not too far off doubling their points from the previous, well, adding an extra 50% on, I should say, from their previous races with how they've done today. They were on 60 points. I think they're going to be in the mid-80s now, so they can be very proud with how they've done.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with you on the Daniel side of things for the driver. For team of the day, though, for me, I'm going to go for another team that had their best result in the season so far, and that's Virtual Esports Racing. I think a 5th and 6th result for that team after what could have been such a great race last time out in Silverstone. What a way to bounce back in very similar conditions. By far their best result of the season so far. Puts them right in the thick of the championship, of that battle for 4th in the championship. So they are going to get my team of the day. Let us know what you guys think the team and the driver of the day was today. Let us know on Twitter. And obviously tune in to League Racing TV in about 13 minutes time or so for the Premier Division. Go and watch James Head and our good mate Daniel Hoggard, who obviously used to commentate on the League One Championship, commentate over that one. That is sure to be another great race. Can Leonis continue to extend their championship lead in the Premier Division? We will wait and see. Tune into League Racing TV as well for the rest of the week. Divisions 2, 3 are tomorrow at 8 PM and Divisions 4 and 5 are taking place at 8 PM as well on Friday. And we will be back for the next round in Monza in about a month's time in the final week of March. But for myself and Luke, it is thank you very much for tuning in once again, and we will see you in a month's time. Goodbye.